All right, y'all. Welcome to the Course Cafe, episode 1. I'm kicking things off with a good friend of mine, Ben Boskovich, editor-in-chief over at Skratch. We get into a real one, this convo. It's all about how golf changed a lot. We talk about the pandemic jumpstart, how the new wave of brands is flipping the script, and how style is becoming just as important as swing speed. It's less polos tucked in, more self-expression. We get into the sustainability, the power of storytelling, and why finding your crew in golf makes all the difference. And of course, we talk about how well a worn piece in your closet can carry way more than just fabric. This episode sets the tone for what Course Cafe is all about. Golf, but make it personal, fashion, community culture, and just a little bit of chaos. Let's get into it. Knowing in the last really like 5 to 8 years, I would say 6 to 8 years, like we've just been inundated with brands, products, leagues, stories. Like there's just a lot that is going on, where it feels like at the end of the day, from a consumer and a fan perspective, like we have more choice, and it
Mhm.
feels like the sport is now ours as opposed to just being on the outside in.
Yeah.
I guess from like that standpoint, when is a space in time or a moment in time where you felt like golf became ours or yours specifically?
I think it honestly, I would describe it more as like a shared experience nowadays versus like there was no ownership from people that looked at the game the way that we're looking at the game right now. It actually makes me wonder like how many people were on the fringes of golf for how long, building their own communities and a time where the internet wasn't as like open for business as it is now for all this stuff to pop up, for that influx to happen. Um, but I would say like everybody's going to have a different answer to that question because there was a point in time I feel like where post college, post getting my career started, I finally had a little bit of disposable income and disposable time to get back into the game as much as I had kept the love for it in my heart. Like I just didn't have the time to engage in it. And I would say that was probably 2017, 2016. Um, really starting to notice that I can think of a brand like Bonobos getting into golf back in those
Mhm.
times and like being like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Like during a menswear boom, this brand Bonobos comes kind of rises to the top in a way of becoming like a mainstream go-to for guys and making good pants. And then naturally they decide to, I think they started a line called Made Golf, Maide,
Hmm.
and kept that going for a little bit, and then eventually just rolled that into Bonobos Golf. And I forget what year it was, but I went on a trip with them to Portugal, and
Hmm.
the whole point of the trip was like the Portuguese tourism board wanted to like show that Portugal's a golf destination. So we went over there and wore all Bonobos golf clothes and played a couple of courses, and I think that's when I realized like I went on that trip with a couple of guys who were I didn't necessarily know in my golf purview at that time because I was still, I was still paying attention to the pro game and is everything. But I went with like a photographer, a YouTuber, and an Instagram influencer, and I was the
Hmm.
only journalist of the mix, so I could see that things were changing. Right, like the people that they wanted to be talking about the products in the sport were not the same old people. The public figures in golf became democratized a little bit more. So I would say around that time is when I started noticing like something's happening here. And as somebody that loves this game and as John Buscemi put it recently, like had been dressing up in a costume to play golf
Hmm.
up until that point, it was a breath of fresh air. So I would say, yeah, probably around that time is when I noticed like, okay, this could be a thing. This intersection might actually be a track moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think from like my POV, I graduated in college in 2013. And so like mall culture, the way that we shopped was very much still in-store experience. Like the idea of D2C was still very, very young. And even social media too, just the way that we engaged with content and the way we shopped was so different. And so the conversations that were happening around the sport for me were still entry level. And to your point, like dressing in a costume, like what I found was only at retail environments. So the idea of like even some of these franchise contents that we've been putting out on the Golf Projects channel around not for golf, like that's all I was interested in. And so like this idea that A lot of the pieces that I was still wearing on the golf course were very much your Nikes, your Adidas of the world, very much like sportswear driven, what was on the tour now. It's like the transition of both conversation, brands that were popping up. Again, just going back to the idea that there is much larger assortment of conversation, product, brands, leagues, everything from that standpoint. We just have more choice. So now it feels like ours as opposed to us trying to mold our way into this thing that has existed for hundreds of years. Do you think like was there a specific moment where either it was through a piece of content, just because I know that you've been so close to that, or even what a brand has done, like you talked about Bonobos. From a content perspective, did you feel like there was a shift happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think to pinpoint a moment where a shift started to happen that I felt like I was a part of was probably in that post-pandemic uh, window where the sport was booming and everybody was trying to play it. And I started noticing, to your point, like a lot of stuff popping up on my Instagram feed that was golf adjacent, menswear adjacent, that I hadn't necessarily heard of before. Brands like Public Drip. I got Metalwood on my radar like very early in their life cycle. Obviously, Malbin came around pretty early, so you start to see these things popping up, and you're like, okay. I think there's a different type of storytelling happening with these brands through their content, through their marketing, through their advertising, how they style things. Um, you start to notice that approach to being a clothing brand versus some of the traditional golf clothing brands were like, yeah, we mastered the silhouette and the fabric. We're just gonna make like a billion different versions of it and make sure that
Mhm.
like, this the way that you could express yourself was like, I'm a green polo guy, but I'm a striped polo guy, or I'm a long
Mhm.
sleeve polo guy. There weren't those options. So to your point, now there's all of these options that start popping up, and that it's. I think I started ingraining myself in this community that had been forming post pandemic of like golf is a lifestyle,
Mm.
like golf is how I'm gonna. And it's different for everybody, but for me, it was like how I found my peace. It's how I found my happiness. It was meditative for me. So being able to talk about golf in that regard and do that through a clothing brand, even, you think about like a quiet golf, right? Who capitalizes on a sort of very long holding trend of minimalism and, you know, that eventually becomes a buzzword like quiet luxury. They
Mhm.
ride that wave on perfect timing. And suddenly they're talking about the fashion side of golf and not necessarily the sport at all. And
Yep.
the conversations online at that time are starting to become the score doesn't matter. Like that, the score doesn't matter movement starts happening, and it's all about. And listen, I mean, there are a lot of people listening to this. They're probably like, yeah, I've been on that since 2010, since
Mhm.
2005. But I think the pandemic's what opened golf up to the mainstream in a whole new way. I mean, it's a big reason why you and I are here chatting right now, I would say.
Yeah, the idea of like how our relationship with the sport has changed. Obviously, like you said, a lot of people point towards 2019. I think there was just a ton that was going on around that time that had already been baking up until that point. But just because there was a sheer volume of participants went through the roof, and it was also a time where there was a decent amount of really tasteful brands that also started popping up. So it was just this like arc where the relationship with the sport drastically changed. And I think from like my POV, that's where I started having conversations online through like the golf projects lens because it was always something that I was having with the homies and the friends and the stuff on the golf course that nobody else was really talking about, even through the lens of social, obviously, um, on TV and whatnot. Like they're not having stylistic conversations. And so a lot of that is just happening at the floor level. And so just taking a leap and giving myself basically like 6 months to a year to see if anybody else cared about the
Hmm.
stuff that I was seeing through social media, and at retail too was obviously something that popped. From like your POV, how has like your lifestyle within golf changed? You can look at that 2018, 2019 arc point. the relationship with golf? How has that changed?
As somebody who, my way into golf was through fashion, right? Because that was like something that I had built my career adjacent to. Um, and golf was a hobby that was on the side. I think 2018 and before, or, maybe earlier than that, my relationship with golf was like, if I can do it once a week, if I can get a tee time, or if like my dad books one for me, when I'm a
Mm,
teen, um, awesome. And I'm going to give it my all. And like, when it's over, it's over. And I might, be thinking about it in bed or whatever. And then you grow up and you realize that it's such a big part of who you are and who you want to be, that the pictures on your walls start being a little bit more golf adjacent, and
mm,
the Instagram accounts that you're following start to become a little more golf adjacent, and the things you see in the wild that kind of like make you raise your eyebrow are a little bit more golf adjacent. And I started to think of things in that way around that time where you're saying like the market and the participation in golf demanded more choice,
mhm,
and the market delivered. I think what you and I heard a lot during that time was probably like, I created this brand because I didn't see one out there that felt like it was speaking to me. And
mhm,
every time I've heard that, I've been like, no doubt, like I understand why you felt that way. Now, I guess I would put that question back to you. Like, do we have too many? Have we peaked at this yet? I mean, I guess, from a competitive creative standpoint, like more in the market's always good because the cream rises to the top. But I do feel like I've in the later years of this golf boom, as it goes on, have heard still people saying that, like, I didn't see something out there for me. And I started to think, my reaction to those is like, well, no, how? Because there's so much
mhm.
now. You know what I mean? Like, hit me or Raymond up. We will tell you 3 brands of your archetype that are like right there for you, whether you're prep or skate or traditional or uh, throwback, vintage. Like there's a brand for you.
That is like the constant thing that I battle just in my own space of in terms of volume. Like I get a lot of DMs about there's too much, it's oversaturation. And I think even going back to the players and what Del Campo did at golf camp, like you had a decent amount of people, like well over 100, if not 150 people that were jam packed in this small little boutique hotel for this one off experience, hyped about the 10 or 12 brands that were all there that they had never knew were on their radar. So the idea that we're so in the weeds, like sometimes the volume does feel like a lot, but I think people that are on the outside or scratching the surface, the whole reason why like the golf projects idea that I had popped so well is because there's not or it wasn't a source of discovery that was like
Hmm.
curating all of these different brands and experiences that were going on. So for you to come across something, to your point, it is like a slow drip where the world around you, as your interest grows, starts to organically show up. Whereas what we're doing is now serving that. We're bringing that forward in a way that hasn't been done before, which is really interesting. But
Yeah.
I think from like my POV, yes, my feeds might feel stuffed, but again, going back to the golf camp, like there's still so much that people have no idea what's going on, even from like a brand, a product standpoint. So the idea that we constantly get to be in this universe of discovery and serving is something that I'm like so hyped about just because it's never dead, it's never dying, and it's constantly cycling, which is really interesting. And to your point, there's loads of archetypes out there that exist, and we get to serve all these different recipes and meals to all these different users. Is It's been a lot of fun.
The thing about golf camp that's cool is like it opened my eyes that like I'm still discovering brands. Like there might not
Yep.
be somebody more exposed to what's out there than you and I, right? And like I'm walking into that courtyard and I'm like, what is that? Like I saw a guy at the course that had a hat on with a dinosaur logo on it. And I was
Mm.
like, what is that brand? I can't remember the name of it right now. I don't know if you remember. They were at golf camp.
The Rex
Um,
Golf.
Rex Golf. Yeah. I'm like, what is that? They're like, it's Rex. Have you never heard of it? And I'm like, embarrassingly, I have not. I'm the guy that's supposed to know this shit. So, but then they're at golf camp and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And to your point, it's a place where people can feel like an entry point into capital G golf, right? Like we're at the marquee tournament of the professional tour in their hometown, and there's 200 people packed into a courtyard that might have felt adjacent to the tournament in years past. But as events like that start to happen and big media brands like ours start to embrace it, meanwhile, across the street, the tour is starting to embrace the creator economy. And we got the Creator Classic going on Wednesday. Like those two rivers are merging. Like there
Hmm.
will be a confluence in the near future where there's just like really not a separation between those two worlds. And that's credit to the pro game and the establishment a little bit for starting to embrace it a little bit, but it's also credit to us and our community and all the people we've gotten to meet for just being persistent about like, yeah, like we want to make waves. Like I think the people that we chat with on a week to week basis, like they don't just want to make clothes and they don't just want to express themselves. Like at least I hope that they feel like they want to inspire change. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like give people new ideas of how to get dressed. Because
100%.
when I was growing up, you know, I was like you, kind of embracing a not for golf sort of mentality to get dressed. And the best thing I could do was go to TJ Maxx and get a Ralph Lauren polo for 15.99 out of the kids section and a size double XL that fit me, and put it on with my church pants and go to the golf course. And I felt a little bit different than like all the other people out there because I was wearing a PK polo that had no elastane in it. And I was like, no, this is just like Ralph Lauren makes a perfect polo. Why would I ever not wear that polo to play
Yeah.
golf? Um, and all of a sudden it's, 2020 and you've got a lot more options than just, that small pony. And,
Hmm.
I think I know I'm changing subjects here, but it's something you and I talk about a lot. But like material usage and percentages and combinations is something I think like past half decade consumers have started to pay closer attention to, like the like anti sweat wicking material movement, which I'm not necessarily a part of, but it happened. And because there are benefits to those fabrics and those things. I mean,
Hmm.
I know they're synthetic, but they help out performance wise. There's a reason the pros wear them.
Yep.
And people start to think about like, what if wool was a part of this? What if we embraced cotton a little bit more and um, more natural fibers and stuff? And even like people like Matt Carpenter, who runs Driveway Paradise, making
Hmm.
t-shirts and polos and stuff out of mint, which is crazy, like a mint fabric. He'll have to come on and explain it to us sometime. But and then Left of Field Golf making recycled water bottle polos that feel just as stretchy and breathable
Hmm.
as your classic. So it's all of these things happening at the same time, like consumers becoming interested in the quality and the longevity of their things, um, combined with new brands that hear that delivering it. It's a pretty exciting time to get dressed.
No doubt. And like the entry point is for a lot of new folks is either a really interesting experience or a really interesting story. And I think that that is like from a volume perspective, that's happening at the highest level, like never before in this space. And that's where I go back to this idea of unpacking what golf is a lifestyle, that it's going through its first lifestyle era. And I think from these tastemakers brands perspective, the way for them to break through is coming through with unique product that's delivered through a unique story. So it's not necessarily just a color story or it's not a feature benefit story. They want to take the time to talk about their experience building these different products and the why behind it too, which has been really, really interesting. Even like you said, I just got off the phone with Neil Tan from Public, and like where his mind at is on sustainability and talking about water, and like these individuals are thinking about things differently, but then also trying to figure out how to articulate that to the end consumer. Because to your point, they care about that stuff, but nobody has really created a story type uh, drip campaigns, like whatever you want to call it, through a marketing perspective and brand perspective on how to narrate that. And I think that that's where we also come in to be able to fill the gaps and talk about things not from a feature benefit perspective, but through the not for golfs of the world, the how it was made behind the brand. Like we can really provide that bridge between these brands and the stories they want to tell, but from a resources standpoint, can't prioritize a lot of that what's happening behind the scenes or underground.
Yeah, I think that golf has benefited in this regard from the sort of like 2010 to 2015 menswear boom that sort of happened in general, where a lot of guys started paying closer attention to what they were buying and what they're wearing, and you know, complimenting each other on what they were wearing and having conversations about it. And the thing that brought you and I together to become friends in the first place, like that was a movement of people finding out that there were other people like them that cared about the way they were dressing and how their clothes were made, and the stories behind how things became things. And like I remember like, you know 2011, 12, big like military fashion complex where like,
Surplus.
yeah, like going to the Army Navy store and buying those kind of jackets and fatigues and stuff was like a big thing. And during that time, like I had fun learning about like, okay, what kind of Army Ranger wore this type of jacket, or like why was this a garment functional? Because that was the coolest thing. Like people were learning about the heritage behind clothes and like their original functionalities, and not like the fashion side. Like people didn't care about how they looked, but they had specific function of why they're wearing these clothes. A lot of
Mhm.
workwear movement comes from that kind of stuff, and um, we benefit from that now because we've all of those people have become golfers,
Yeah.
and all the golfers that are of this generation came up in the era of hashtag menswear Tumblr or fit pics on Instagram. It's like a thing now. It wasn't a thing
Mhm.
before uh, as much. So like we benefit from that, and we benefit from having been a part of it, knowing what might be coming next. Golf fashion traditionally has lagged a little bit behind the trends of like a traditional menswear cycle, but I think we're getting closer and closer now to not lagging behind, and golf's actually catching up, like to the extent that it can. Like there's only so much avant-garde work you can do.
Is there any specific, like, storylines or narratives that you've been drawn to over these last couple of years that is just, like, super interesting from your POV?
Well, I mean, starting with like the one that everybody talks about, like the one brand, like the one I'm wearing now, Malbin, like how Steven got started with the brand is really fascinating, and how he found golf in the first place that inspired him to start the brand is really interesting. Like partying pretty hard and then deciding he was going to change his ways and get up early and go play golf instead, and become obsessed with that. I think a lot of us had similar experiences with the game where you just latch right onto it. I really liked that. I think the way that Cole at Metalwood thinks of himself as a menswear brand, a fashion brand, not
Mhm.
a golf brand, but is inspired by golf. Like to me, what he has built epitomizes the lifestyle that we're talking about, right? Because that's a direct application of that idea that we're talking about, in that you're not changing the way that you're, or what you're interested in, or what inspires you, right? Like Cole was very inspired by fashion, capital F fashion.
Mhm.
But he sees it through a golf lens, and he marries those things. And I think those vignettes, like those moments, are what really hit with people. And it almost makes you want to adapt everything around that like metalwood lifestyle, right? Like playing
Mhm.
blades and wearing baggy pants and shopping for vintage clubs. It can really give people an archetype to attach to.
No doubt, and, like, the other thing from these tastemaker brands' perspective, like, they very much prioritize, like, visually how they show up And so, like, you and I have talked about the importance of lookbooks and building out these different worlds from a visual perspective. It's if it's their first touch point, they immediately are drawn in because it's mutual interests. Whereas a lot of even the content from a stylistic standpoint was always shot on course with either pro amateurs or whatnot, somebody who has really great swings. Whereas some of the stuff you're seeing with like Metalwood is a dad pushing a push mower with his foot joys on, like that. Some narratives like that has never really existed. Even going back to like the way that manners, how they show up in social, they almost never talk about product. Obviously it's always in the shots, but they're this like inspirational aspirational brand that has really great quality that helps you understand and pinpoint where manners is at from a style standpoint, where they are on a quality standpoint, and they're for like the golf sickos that really care about the lifestyle, the adventure aspect of the sport. um those are things
Man,
that have drawn my interest in.
talk about a pivot in time, right? Like Manners took a big risk and rebranded like relatively early into, honestly, it wasn't relatively early into their life, but golf had just started hitting hard. It was like that in that post pandemic timeline that they were like, we're actually going to switch things up and go from this sort of
Mhm.
like, I think posh sort of British prep sort of vibe to this traveling adventure, um, nomad walking kind of vibe. And I think initially what I heard from people was like, I kind of liked what Manners was, like why would they do
Mhm.
that? And I was not skeptical, but like cautiously optimistic. And I think they knocked it out of the park. Like however many years later, now we're looking back, like I can't imagine them being anything else. And they're owning that space really in an interesting way. And I think it's because of the quality of the content they make and that not
Mhm.
heavy handed advertising element to it that people are like, all right, I trust
Yeah.
these guys. And once you buy the clothes, you're like, yeah,
Oh,
these
I'm
are
in.
very good.
Yeah, the I mean, even going back to, like, Cole and Metalwood, like, their past experiences has helped them from a refinement standpoint get back to, like, the soul of who they are and, like, the things that they're interested in, and then on the flip side, they're also serving products that haven't existed in the sport, so it's like the perfect mesh. Same thing with Cole is doing at Metalwood, like, there's a bunch of these tastemaker brands that have found that balance between the things that they've grown up with around in those experiences and then trying to deliver products that fill the gaps for things that hasn't existed in their world. Um, from both like a style and story perspective, is there anything that you don't think the industry is talking about at all or enough about?
Yeah, honestly, the youth. There's really not a ton of brands out there that have a child facing sort of strategy other than our friend Chris with Jane Golf, which is
Mhm.
as good as it gets in terms of a brand that you and your kids can enjoy together. And not just the clothing, but the experiences that they put on, the way that they look at golf. I mean, Chris started that brand as a way to introduce his daughter to golf in a way that he thought would be more appropriate than the way that like he kind of got introduced to golf, which is that this is an elitist sport that's not for little girls, right? Um,
Mhm.
Sugarloaf, our comrades at Pro Shop, they have a lot of stuff that is fun and playful that really lends itself to that youthful energy. I think about like Torosaurus Rex and how like incredible that is and how much that excites a 7-year-old kid who's going to put that Torosaurus Rex putter cover on their first putter, and me, a 35-year-old man who just like can nerd out and get geeked over those logos. So like they're speaking to that sort of playful, youthful mentality. So I think more brands like that sort of like marry the connection between the people learning what golf is and those who are introducing them to it. I mean, Chris is a good friend, but I'm also just a huge, objectively, like huge fan of what he's doing with Jane, and um, I think that will actually make golf get bigger in the way that we want it to. And when you talk about Neil in public drip, I think he's walking that walk too, and that he's not going to skimp on quality. Like he's one of the people that's not going to be like, send me a blank with a logo on it. Like
Hmm.
he's getting samples back 3, 4, 5, 6 times over, 7 times over, making sure that it's right. Like that's menswear. That's a hashtag menswear mentality, right? Like he cares about that stuff. That he wants to change the game in a positive way. He wants to walk the walk instead of just being like, no, we're here to exist and be different, and that's it. How we do it isn't
Hmm.
important. The why, the how is crucial to him. So brands like those, like people like that, um, doing it for those right reasons, like that's why we'll be better off in the future, I think.
No, 100%. The piece that I put out, it might have been last year, the first Camp Jane, which I haven't been to a Camp Jane yet, which I'm like dying inside. I moved out of Orange County basically when everything exploded. And so I just constantly am in my feeds, like missing out on all these different experiences that are going on. But last year when I covered Camp Jane, the idea and the narrative around grow the game, I think has always come back to, for me specifically, is like how do you make the game more approachable? And that's where I go back to stories and experiences. One of those two are going to be the early entry point for a lot of people. If they're interested in fashion, their touch point is clothing, the touch point is experiences and stories. From an experience standpoint, with Camp Jane is doing, again, going back to like the family atmosphere. Again, a lot of that stuff hasn't existed. Even what Topgolf does, it goes back to the early part of the pod in the sense that we have more to choose from, and it allows us to be, I don't know, feel a part of the game differently because it's ours now. It's not we're molding ourselves into this box that has always existed.
And we can show up in places now and know that we belong right away. And not just that, that everybody around here shares some common ground with us, and we might be able to talk about the same things, not just the
Mhm.
same old things, that golf people talk about. So you show up to
That
Camp Jane and you're like, oh, everybody here is kind and open and honest and will do you a favor, because like that's the vibe that it gives off.
Mhm. And what I wanted to follow up was, is there anything either pre 2019 or even earlier where you used to show up a certain way, a certain style, a certain personality? Has that, as like the lifestyle in your relationship with the sport, how much has that changed throughout these last couple of years? The way you show up from a style standpoint, the way you show up from a personality standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, from a style standpoint, that's a head scratcher every time I'm getting dressed to go, because you got to consider like who you're playing with. What do you think they'll be wearing? Like, I don't know. I try to be chameleonic in that. Like, I don't want to stay in one archetype. I like to mold myself to the group that I'm with. So I don't think I ever thought about that before playing golf. Like, it was almost like, can I get out the door? Can I get there on time?
Mm.
Am I following the rules? Like, that's the main
Yep.
thing. Are you following? Is your shirt tucked in? Is there a collar? What do your shoes look like? Like, is there anything? Honestly, I'll just say it. Like, is there anything about the way I'm dressed that's going to make me look as poor as I actually am at this golf
Mm.
course, right? Like growing up, not being a member of a country club, like playing goat tracks and stuff. It's like, all right, I have to like make myself look like I belong here. That was the only goal.
Mhm.
What that means now, make myself look like I belong here, is like try to get some compliments from my friends on the tee box, which inherently is just like a better way to go, because you're like, how can I express myself? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There, expressing yourself wasn't necessarily encouraged, uh, when I was learning how to play the game. So yeah, following the rules, and now like my mo is to try to bend the rules as much as possible. Like the questions that I'm asking myself before I go out is like, can I get away with no collar at this place? And if I can, what does that open up? That opens up the hoodie, the t-shirt tucked in, the t-shirt untucked, the quarter zip that's loud and like this, and looks like a futuristic space age Lakers fever dream.
For me, like the Muni's always been like a space to experiment. Especially, like, where I'm at, the sticks, like, there is absolutely no dress code. When I came, because I lived in Irvine, California, and we used to always play at, I think it was called the Oaks or something like that in Irvine, very strict dress codes, and then when I booked my very first tee time here at the Muni where I live, You're talking flip-flops, you're talking
Oh,
wife beaters, like, people do not care at
jean
all, and
shorts.
it's
You get some
jean
jeans.
shorts, very laid back, board shorts, like, hoop shorts. There's 0 dress code, and it was to the point where you didn't even have to have a tea time. Like, you would show up and be hopeful that nobody was on hole 1, and you could just step up if nobody had called in.
Right.
For me, like, that atmosphere is a playground to just try new things, whether it's colors or textures or how do we incorporate the not for golf mentality with things that are intended for golf. So a lot of manners with Arc'teryx, a lot of Nike with Polo Ralph Lauren, like just trying to mix and match, trying to find my taste, my style. And then when you do get the invites to some of the more higher level, like public courses and whatnot, you have now like a core wardrobe that you can always go back to, some staples that you feel comfortable within. The follow-up that I do have that is also interesting around the oversaturation of golf. Now that there is a ton of archetypes and a ton of different pockets of interest, like how important from your perspective is it that these pockets continue to still merge and have conversations where it doesn't feel so segregated?
I would put that back to you and say, well, I'll answer it because you asked the question. It's your podcast. I haven't witnessed a ton of that like segregation or like combativeness, I guess, or competitiveness. I would say. I think so. My answer would be, in my experience, all of these new crops of brands feel like they want to support each other because they're ultimately have the same mission. And to your question, like, yes, it is imperative that they continue to act that way. I think when I hear about like this guy's got beef with this guy and stuff like that, it it saddens me because we're not our own enemies. And I don't think that happens
Mhm.
that often, right? Like the enemy is there's no enemy, but like the enemy is the rules, right? Like
Yep, yep.
the enemy is the idea that we can't make ourselves look put together unless we're scripted.
That was what I was hoping you were gonna have a call out on the rules, 'cause that feels like enemy number 1. Even going back to, like, Stephen Malbin's, like, whole ethos around, the way he looks at collaborations, and it's just like, I'm not trying to tear anybody down, I'm still competitive, like, I still care about the Malbin brand, but at the end of the day, like, we're just trying to serve consumers really dope looks and dope ideas with the idea that this could show up in a bigger capacity and tell a unique story. Again, it goes back to the early touch point, like, what do people care about? Because it doesn't, I think from, like, a DMs and a comments perspective on the channel, there's occasionally people will talk about, "I wish there wasn't as many collabs just because I want these brands to compete," but I think that comes from just old school traditional thinking where you were very like, "I'm a Nike guy. I'm an Adidas guy. I'm an upcycle guy. Like, I'm an old age guy, vintage guy." So just trying to make sure that a lot of these different archetypes, a lot of these different pockets of golf, like, they continue to have conversations, they continue to mold.
That is oversaturated, in my opinion, in all of clothing, not just in our sport. I think it's become unexciting when you see that a collab's coming out. It used to be like, oh my God, like, and this is even probably past the peak, but like a collaboration like Gucci and Adidas is the one that will like sit me up in my chair, get me out of
Mm,
bed. That kind of stuff used to happen few and far between where you were like, whoa, they're working together. And I think a lot of the streetwear brands, I guess they're still seeing a yield from it, right? Like the market has to be still telling these brands that collaborating is important. And I guess I still would like to pursue collaborations. Like if we were running a brand, and maybe we will in the near future have some input into, some garments.
mhm.
I would want to collab with some people that have similar sensibilities and that we can tell a good story through. But I would feel less inclined to do it just because the novelty has worn off. Do you
Yeah.
feel similarly, or do you still on the collab rocket ship?
I go back and forth because I feel like it has become the, like, limited edition storyline. Like, that's the narrative around it. Whereas there used to be projects that were house projects that were limited that people were super hyped about, but I think just overall, fast fashion is like a real thing. Volume
Mhm.
is like a real thing. So the only other way to like get a little bit of energy, a little bit of that like limited mystiqueness is to do something on a collab nature because then you have two different voices, two different audiences. And again, from a commercial standpoint, the goal is to always bring in more to get more eyeballs. You have to be able to deliver an experience or a narrative storyline that is attaches itself to multiple audiences that isn't
Yeah.
just serving the same audience over and over. So I think it's more so of it goes back to like the why, like what two brands are coming together and why. Is it just a logo application process, or is there like a true unique storyline that's happening, that's going to be told? That's something that I think is lacking right now for sure.
I would agree on the whole for sure. I guess on the flip side, if I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself, like if we really want this crop of golf brands to grow rapidly, like them helping each other do that is probably good holistically, right? For like the movement.
Hmm.
Um, I think about like Sugarloaf, Social Club, X, Quiet Golf. Like, yes, that collaboration lent itself to like a really great logo collaboration. Like Owl and
Hmm.
Arrow is one of the coolest things that I've seen of recent. But it also like those brands are they have a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, and in those differences, those two audiences can find the other, and like those are also two brands that I would style together very naturally in different ways. So like it's a very natural collaboration for them to work together, and yeah, like now people Sugarloaf has a very very loyal rabbit audience, right? Like how many of them might not have known that Quiet Golf was a thing all the way across
Hmm.
the country, and vice versa. The people that know Quiet Golf know Quiet Golf. Um, and Sugarloaf's kind of like an OG in this regard. They've really been around like before the boom. You know what I mean? Like they're one of the originals cool golf brands that's ever existed. Um, but I digress. Like that was a good collaboration for all of those reasons. And I think if you can
Hmm.
check several boxes in that regard, there's no reason not to.
Hmm. Yeah, that I mean, because like projects like what John is doing at Sentinel, and when he links up with like a McKinsey out here in Portland, like some of the stuff that they're doing is so insane, but also they're very low key. So it's a part of it is it feels like if you know, you know type of situation, which was always golf for the longest time, even now to this standpoint where there's still a lot of discovery to be had. Um, but yeah, it's just it's interesting. I think if they're coming together for the right reasons, if they're trying to tell a unique story through product or just through the story of golf, like FootJoy and what Metalwood are doing, of like the idea of the traditionalist and the vintage aesthetic, the menswear aesthetic, like coming together, like they can create some crazy projects. And it's always interesting to see what some of these really talented tastemakers can do with legit resources in the space. Because a lot
Hmm.
of what they can do is only at the capacity that they're at in that time and space. Whereas if they get an abundance more of resources, like what are their capabilities? That's what I'm really interested in. Like what could a Quiet Golf do with a FootJoy? What could a Sentinel do with some of these major brands that exist out there, whether it's in golf or out of golf? Like what could Sentinel and an Arc'teryx do? That would be a wild thing. I don't know what that would look like, but the idea that they coexist in these different spaces around material and function, like they could create really great projects together. So those are things like I anticipate and I'm hopeful for. Um, and it's just like kind of sitting back and waiting to your point, like is Adidas and Gucci coming together? Like what's going to get me out of my seat type situation.
See, now you just got me thinking about collabs that I want, and I'm going back on my initial prompt, which is that like I think I'm over collabs, but yeah, now it gets you thinking like you know, Manners X Woolrich. You know what I mean? Like an adventure on the go brand with the flannel OGs. The wool gods. Like that could be really cool. We should play a game sometime where like I throw out a brand and you throw out the perfect collab
A
for
perfect
them.
collab.
That could be
That's
a not
funny.
for golf game too. You'd be like, all right, here's a a golf item I love, like what's a non-golf brand that makes the same thing that you could just wear?
That's
There's so
probably been
many.
the most interesting thing over the last like year and a half with the golf projects page, the not for golf like conversation. Just because again, you and I, like that's our world that we exist in. There's a whole bunch of discovery to be had that is very specific to the sport. But on the flip side, 98% of what's going on in fashion in menswear is happening outside of the sport that can
Yeah.
easily translate into it. And again, I think whether through it's the Lenza collab or just like inspo, there's so much more room to explore from a style standpoint that I'm really excited about. But yeah, we could talk about that for days. Is there, I guess, from the outside in, if somebody was coming in and asking you that they haven't found like their space yet, whether it's trying to find an experience that matches their interest or a story that motivates or inspires them, like what would you say to go do to try and find their pocket in the sport?
I think first I would go to scratch.golf and click around the style section to see like some of that discovery. But I mean, that's a big part of what we want to do, right? Like, and not just in the style section, is be a discovery platform for all the cool stuff that has been popping up. But honestly, like we're building something really, really special here in the golf media space. And thanks to people like you, Raymond, we're going to build the most tasteful media brand in golf. So come check us out and yeah, read the style section. We will never steer you wrong. Promise.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Peace. All right, that's a wrap for today's episode. If you're feeling the vibe, hit that subscribe button and drop us a quick review. It helps us keep the conversation going and growing. For more golf fashion, follow us over at Skratch and Golf Projects. We're always serving up style and stories that make this game what it is. And if you're hungry for even more, head over to Scratch.golf, where our collective stories live. Until next time, dress well and play fast. Peace.